So we have been receiving throughout both the QPPI, Quaker Public Policy Institute, and our annual meeting, the gifts that people are bringing in, people who are part of our community, people who are adjacent, Quaker adjacent, that's a term that's used, people who are special guests that we've invited in, receiving their gifts. And I taught a class at Haverford for a few years called Quaker Social Witness, and there was an old film, it's a black and white documentary about Rufus Jones. And Rufus Jones, many of you know, was very instrumental in the humanitarian work post-World War II and American Friends Service Committee, and he was also a spiritual guide for Quakers. And in the reel, he's speaking, and he at one point I realized he says this phrase where he says that he believes Quakers are called to be God's hands in the world. And I thought, whoa, that is bold. It didn't sound like Quaker humility to me. That is bold. But of course, Quakers do try to do the work, to be the hands of spirit in the world. And then this weekend, I was thinking about that again, and I thought about, what are God's hands like? Well, the Spirit's hands are never closed, right? They're open, receiving the gifts, all the gifts that are brought to us. So thank you for receiving the gifts that many people have brought over the last few days. I know that you are going to be really excited to receive the gifts of our speaker tonight, and that you will receive them with the love that you've showed all week. And I want Jeanné to know that as well, that we will be holding you, as Quakers like to say. And we're so grateful you're here. And before I introduce Jeanné, I have a special announcement. Because another guest who came a few days ago, if you were with us at Quaker Public Policy Institute, many people were here for that too, was Representative Sarah Jacobs, who we awarded the Edward F. Snyder Peace Award for her work. And she's an incredible leader on many peace issues. But you might have noticed, I noticed something that happened at that meeting, which was that when we came over here to gather and take pictures, there were a couple people from California around San Diego, her district, Advocacy Corps members actually. I don't know if either of them are here, but there were 2 Advocacy Corps members in the pictures. And I caught, after the picture kind of ended, I caught from my ear that they were lobbying her right there. Very respectfully. And I heard her saying, well, I support a cessation of hostilities in Israel. She said, and they said, but would you support a ceasefire? And I heard them do this kind of twice. I heard her have to kind of smile and say, because she's on camera, literally there were cameras around. So that was a wonderful moment just to realize what amazing advocates are in our community. Well, I've just now heard from Hassan, I don't think he's here yet, but he will be, that she has just come out in support publicly of a ceasefire. God's hands, that's pretty amazing, friends. So, it's a good strategy, maybe. So I hope Jeanné's getting a little taste of our community and the power here. I am so impressed by the power and gifts of our guest, Jeanné Lewis. Jeanné is CEO of Faith in Public Life. She's a nonprofit executive, faith-based organizer, and authority on creating empowered communities. She has dedicated her career to building bridges, closing equity gaps, and creating policies that lead to strong, thriving, and self-determined cities. Jeanné received her undergraduate degree from Washington University in St. Louis and holds an MA in conflict resolution from Antioch University. She resides in Washington, D.C., and is a member of the D.C. Working Families Party, St. Augustine Catholic Parish, and Songrise, a women's social justice a cappella group. Oh. She is also an incredibly inspiring leader, advocate. I learned so much just over dinner listening to her, and I've had 2 times with Jeanné. One was coffee, as we thought Amelia knew Jeanné, and I had this great thing of meeting the faith leaders still. So I was meeting Jeanné for the first time with the idea of inviting her, and within 5 minutes of listening to Jeanné talk, I was blown away and thought she's just the perfect person to come speak to us at this annual meeting. And then over dinner, I learned about, 1,000 other things just from her in a little bit. So I know we're going to learn so much and be inspired so much by Jeanné, and I want to welcome her to share with us.
All right. Good evening, everyone. Good evening. Gotta get my technology. I'm also very tall and I'm wearing heels, so I need to adjust this whole situation here. Yeah. See if we can work something out here. All right. Much better. Okay. Firstly, I would like to say thank you for receiving me into your community. It's such a joy to be here, and it's such a pleasure to be here. And I know that you've had a long week, and this is Saturday of a long week after a long day after dinner. So Bridget, thanks. And welcome to all of our friends on Zoom. I think that's the camera back there. And I know our friends on Zoom have had a long day of Zoom. So I am hopeful and prayerful that God will work through me. So firstly, you stay awake. And secondly, we can have a conversation together. Bridget mentioned that I do many things and I've done many things. I'd love to share some song with you this evening as well. Yeah, but I will share, I got back to DC last night at 2:30 in the morning after being in California all week, and I feel my throat is a little raspy. So I just want to give a disclaimer. If I missed the note, it does not reflect poorly on Songrise, which is a fabulous group, and if you're ever in DC, you should go hear us sing. So I'll share that. But tonight, I was invited to speak about the challenges we're facing in this special moment of time, and the role of people of faith and faith communities in addressing them. And so I prayed about this quite a bit, about what to talk about, what to say, that hasn't necessarily been said before and that might motivate us to keep going, even though there seems to be a lot of darkness in our world. And I realized that we are in a moment that is pregnant with opportunity. Sometimes the darkest moments are pregnant with opportunity, but those darkest moments can also feel overwhelming for us. And so what God reminded me and what God gave me is for us to think about the spirit of truth, the spirit of truth. So we know that there are many societal challenges that we have to face. And my contemplative practice, I'm Roman Catholic, but I'm also very much a contemplative. I like to start with myself. And I think as Quakers, you all know something about going within. I think I heard that you do that sometimes, right? So I like to start with myself before I think about how I'm going to solve the rest of the world's problems. And so I wanted to share a little bit about my own journey with the spirit of truth. Something that wasn't in my bio in this version was that I ran for DC City Council at large in 2020. That was a year where some big things happened, you may recall. I did not know that there would be a global pandemic when I followed God's call to run for office. I filed in December 2019. In February 2020 and March 2020, I had 7 fundraisers planned, and they all got canceled because people were coughing and they didn't know why. But I had discerned that for 4 years. I really felt called to be a leader in that way, but I hated the idea of running for office, and I wrestled with God for 4 years about that. And turns out my instincts were right, because it was the hardest thing by far I'd ever done. It was very, very hard. It was harder than my father getting in an accident when I was 12 and becoming permanently disabled. It was harder than my own health challenges at one point and needing 2 pints of blood and a blood transfusion because I was so anemic. It was harder than when I got divorced from my first husband. It was very, very hard. It made me vulnerable in a way that I had never experienced before. And I questioned over and over again, was I supposed to do this? Was it making a difference? Why did God want me to do this and go through this, especially during a pandemic year, especially when our country was erupting, finally coming to a new level of understanding about racial violence that we're experiencing? I did not win my council race. I did not win the seat. I received backlash from friends and supporters because as I listened to the spirit of truth, I often deviated just a little bit from the party line. Sometimes there would be an endorsement form and I would agree with 9 of the 10 questions that I was expected to say to get the endorsement. But that 10th question, something about it just wasn't right. And the folks on my team would say, just answer the question. You know what folks are looking to hear. You don't disagree with it that much, do you? But the spirit of truth told me that I had to be honest. I had to be true to what God was saying to me. I got backlash because I decided I would speak to any reporter. If a reporter called me and wanted to ask questions about my platform and my campaign, no matter who their audience was, no matter what their reputation, I would speak to them. And some of my friends didn't like some of the publications that decided to cover some of the things that I was saying because of something the publication had said about another issue several years ago. But I was listening to the spirit of truth. I didn't raise as much money as my competitors. I didn't get any official endorsements, but I also couldn't be placed squarely in a box. And what that meant was that I got lots of feedback from other individuals, people who had never met me before, who said, because of this thing that you said, I voted for the first time in my life. Because of this thing that you said, I volunteered for a campaign, something I never thought I would do. Because of how you showed up in this forum, I think you should run again because no one else is saying the things that you're saying. Some of the things that I advocated for 3 years ago are in discussion right now at the city council level, being taken seriously for the first time in decades because I talked about it. Ideas about different economic models for our city, how to combat poverty and food insecurity in our city. And because I listened, because I honored what I believed to be true, even though I didn't win the seat, I know that I've made a difference in Washington, D.C. As I said, it was hard. Just to emphasize, put a pin on that part, it was hard. I developed a health issue from the level of stress that I was experiencing. Nothing life-threatening or deeply painful, but something chronic that will probably never go away. My boyfriend at the time, who's now my husband, we faced relationship challenges. He had a serious health issue. He had a pulmonary embolism in 2020. They didn't know if it was COVID. It wasn't. It was, just a pulmonary embolism. And I wasn't able to be there for him in the way I normally would, in the way that I fully wanted to. I questioned a lot about whether I was the right person and whether I was indeed doing what God asked of me. But I do feel confident now that I did. And this process, this process of more than a year of discerning how to answer questions, how to engage in specific issues over and over and over again, after 4 years of listening and discerning whether I should even do this in the first place, this to me is engaging in the spirit of truth. So, spirit of truth, I'm using this term, spirit of truth. Well, it's in the Bible, right? You might be familiar with it. In the New Testament, in the Gospel of John 14, 15 to 18 talks about the spirit of truth. So I'm a big fan of retelling Bible stories in my own vernacular. Gives me a lot of joy. So I'm gonna set the stage for you, okay? So it's Passover. It's the last Passover Jesus is sharing with his disciples, his apostles. He knows that he is about to leave them. And he's telling them over and over again, much to their chagrin, that he's about to leave them. And they're like, what are you talking about? Why do you keep saying this? We don't want you to go. You shouldn't go. Whatever's happening, I'm going to prevent you from going. And he's like, listen, I'm getting ready to go, but I will not leave you alone, because I will send an advocate. You all know about advocacy, right? I will send an advocate. The Spirit of truth will be with you always. This advocate is there to support the apostles and all followers of Jesus, to discern truth over and over and over again, always, and also to provide comfort and reassurance that we are not alone, that we are accompanied, and that we are reassured and are listening to what God asks of us and God's love and redemption for us. So I'm going to read the scripture in the style of Lectio Divina. I'm Catholic, so it's a Catholic thing. You all probably know about it. I'm going to read it twice. If you want to follow along, I'm reading from the New American Bible Revised Edition, which is also known as the Catholic Bible, but you know, whatever version you want, it's the same gist as we know about the Bible. But I'm going to read it twice. I'll read it once through, and then I'll read it again. And I invite you on the second time, as you do, because you're Quakers, you know how to do this, to listen for the word or the words that stand out to you. So again, John 14, 15 through 18. Jesus says, "If you love me, you will keep my commandments. And I will ask the Father, and he will give you another advocate to be with you always, the Spirit of truth, which the world cannot accept, because it neither sees nor knows it. But you know it, because it remains with you and will be in you. I will not leave you orphans. I will come to you." If you love me, you will keep my commandments. And I will ask the Father, and he will give you another advocate to be with you always, the Spirit of truth, which the world cannot accept, because it neither sees nor knows it. But you know it, because it remains with you and will be in you. I will not leave you orphans. I will come to you. I'd like to invite you, for whatever word or words stood out to you, to raise your hand if you have experienced that feeling, that word, that sense from the Spirit of truth at some point in your personal life. Raise your hand. Raise your hand or keep it up if you felt it in your public life or in your service to others. The Spirit of truth is here with us now, as Jesus promised. It is with us in our darkest moments, even when we forget to hear it. And we talk about our personal life and our public life, but they're not really separate. We are whole beings, and those parts of our lives integrate with one another. And that's why I started with my personal story. Before we even talk about the world out there. I know I've been talking a long time already. We're gonna get to the issues, I promise. We're gonna get to the issues. But in my own contemplative practice, I am very clear that the patterns and the struggles that are happening within me are echoed in my family, in my community, in the larger world. And the patterns that are happening in the larger world are echoing and reverberating back to me. And so it is critical that we stay grounded, as the Quakers do so well. You model this for us so well. Stay grounded in the spirit of truth so that we can discern among the noise what is true, what God is actually asking of us. The first part of this scripture says, if you love me, you will keep my commandments. And we know the greatest commandment from Jesus is love, to love God and to love our neighbors as ourselves. I started as a faith-based organizer, and one of the first lessons I learned is that in order to love my neighbor as myself, I must love myself. Sometimes they skip that part. Love God, love neighbor, love self. And so Jesus invites us to love. And because Jesus loves us, he gives us a gift in the advocate to remind us of God's love and to help us model God's love to others. Bridget said that we are God's hands. We didn't plan that, right? We didn't plan that. But we are God's hands. We model God's love to others. So one way I listened when I was running for office to the spirit of truth is I asked if this answer I was providing or this policy I was asked to sign on to is rooted in the love of God and the love of neighbor and the love of self. They are not mutually exclusive. They are actually inclusive. And I knew that I was getting to the crux of the spirit of truth when I could identify something that loved all three. How does this proposal, how does this policy show love of God, our creator, the creator of all that is and that sustains us? Is it exploitative of anyone or anything? Does it deny that what God has created is sacred? That is how I love God. How does this policy or proposal love my neighbor? How does it create space for us to be neighbors to each other, good neighbors, to create opportunities for connection and thriving more than dominance and competition? That is how I love my neighbor. How does this proposal show love to myself, allowing me to love myself? How does this proposal meet my needs, my deepest desires, assuage my own fears about my own security in this place and in this time? How does it create space for me to use my gifts to make the community and the world around me a better place? That is how I love myself. And asking these questions, these reflection questions, the spirit of truth can shine, and it applies to our personal lives, the most intimate parts of us, and it also applies to the big problems that we see around us. Verse 17 says, the world cannot accept the spirit of truth because it neither sees it nor knows it. I felt that in my campaign. People didn't want to hear how that 10th question didn't really hit to the values that they said they had. People didn't want to hear that the spirit of truth led me to disagree just slightly in order to refine something or make it better or call us more deeply into love. But what this verse teaches me is that if the world does not see or know the spirit of truth, that's not God's fault, and it's not their fault, because how else might they see the advocate that God has given us as followers of Jesus unless we show them? People cannot experience God's love unless we are co-creators and expanding their recognition of God's love. Verse 17 also says that we, followers of Jesus, know the spirit of truth, and through it we are adopted. We are not orphans. We have ancestors and family who jointly inherit this advocate, this spirit, always. I like science fiction. Always. That is not from now into the future that is always. We know that God is not bound by time. God is not bound by this present moment. Always, the spirit of truth is with us always. So I feel like y'all know this, or else you wouldn't be here. You wouldn't be here at 8 o'clock at night listening to me talk, right? You wouldn't have been lobbying all week. You wouldn't be watching on the Zoom. You know this. And we know that applying this in situations within our control, like our family and our children, sometimes are a little easier than trying to figure out how to put it in the broader sphere. So I wanted to talk about that application and some issues that faith in public life is wrestling with, and also that I know you all have been talking about. Bridget and Alicia shared that one question in your community is wrestling with how to intervene and address systemic racism. And I know that we've all seen a definition or 2 or 5 or 10 of what systemic racism is. Most simply, it's power plus privilege. But I want to unpack that, because I think at this point, sometimes we overlook what systemic racism actually is and where it came from in the context of our country. Those who founded our country started with a beautiful vision and aspiration and immediately compromised it. Immediately. They compromised their values by continuing the abuse of Indigenous people, excluding women from full economic and democratic participation, allowing Africans to be dehumanized through chattel slavery, and of convicted and poor Europeans to be dehumanized through the penal system and indentured servitude. Immediately, those who founded our country, who were very values-driven men, said that all men are created equal with certain unalienable rights. And then immediately they codified that some people were exceptions to that beautiful, beautiful vision. So if we're talking about the spirit of truth as it relates to racism, we have to acknowledge that imperialism, sexism, and racism are codified in our founding. They are in the fabric of who we are as a nation. It's not all of who we are, but it is a part of who we are. And for every stride that we've made as a country, and including new folks, we found another group to exclude over and over again. At this phase in our history, we are all complicit in propagating this legacy that we've inherited. And I do mean all. Sadly, many immigrants to our country, including Black immigrants, adopt the anti-Blackness that the US has exported, trying to separate and distinguish themselves from people like me who are native-born African Americans. Many Black Americans have adopted the classism and xenophobia that seek to exclude poor people and new immigrants from full participation in our democracy. And many white Americans who believe in justice and equity continue to turn a blind eye to relatives and friends who advance supremacist views. There are so many examples of how we each participate in oppression and how we each ourselves experience oppression simultaneously in this country. This is a complex cultural system, and it is who we are as a nation. And so until we face that, we cannot grow into the nation that we aspire to be. That requires courage, and it requires discernment to be able to hold the paradox that we are both oppressors and the oppressed. It requires the spirit of truth. Another question that demands a spirit of truth right now is the question of reproductive health and equity, including abortion access, including maternal mortality, including LGBTQ plus people's access to care, and including so many other surrounding health issues. Specifically, the debate around abortion has been insufficient on both sides for decades. I'm a practicing Catholic, y'all. I get in trouble for this, so hold your hats, okay? Pro-life movements seek to deny women and others the ability to discern, especially in complex health, economic, and social situations, by limiting access to knowledge, restricting the time that people need to contemplate. And notice this, you know what it takes to truly listen and discern. Anything that seeks to restrict someone's time and ability to discern and contemplate is not of God. And criminalizing those who provide information and resources, limiting access to information is not of God. On the other hand, pro-choice movements have advanced a narrative for years that denies the humanity of unborn children. And it doesn't quite resonate with my faith and the faith of so many people in our country. Even my choice of words here, if you dissect my last paragraph, I am sure will offend many people on many sides, because I have not used the preferred terminology and I have not advanced the preferred narrative that either side might want to use to describe this question that our country is wrestling with again. Yet, discerning people know, viscerally, we feel it in our minds, our hearts, and our spirits, that the evolution of the debate around abortion in this country is not flowing from a spirit of truth. I feel this. I feel it in my body. I know that you feel it. I know that you've been wrestling with this all week. And yet, despite all of this, remember, we are not orphans. We are beloved of God, and we have inherited an advocate, the Spirit of truth. So what does the love of God and the love of neighbor and the love of self require and call us into in the face of systemic racism and the questions around reproductive health care? First, it requires us to tell the truth. We gotta tell the truth, y'all. We gotta tell the truth. We have to acknowledge that the state of systemic oppression, especially racism, is codified in our systems, and that we are all complicit. We have to be able to say that with a straight face and be confident in knowing that it is true, and it is not the totality of who we are, nor is it the end of who we might become. We have to acknowledge that both sides of the debate on abortion have connections to systemic racism. Margaret Sanger, who was an early 20th century pro-choice leader, believed in eugenics. And the pro-life movement adopted a lot of its rhetoric in the 70s and early 80s as a backlash to the advancements that the civil rights movement was making, and was funded and advanced by white supremacists. You can Google it. As a Black woman, if people ask me my opinion on this issue, I hold both of those realities in my head, and I understand that if I am going to form a position or take a stance or engage in this issue, I must lean on God and the Spirit of truth to hold that reality and that paradox and not completely abandon the conversation, not choose a side, sacrificing my values, but listen deeply enough so that I can find a truer truth. We must say these facts with the same love and compassion that Jesus demonstrated over and over again in his ministry on this earth. The Spirit of truth helps us discern between those who are wrestling and deeply seeking what is right, and those who are so entrenched in their positions that they are denying God's love to others. That's a difficult thing to discern, but we must do it. When Jesus engaged the first person who was wrestling with what is right, he offered kindness, compassion, forgiveness, and an invitation to a better way of being. But for the latter, for the person who was entrenched and insistent on denying God's love, he offered chastisement and criticism, and still an opportunity to grow and redeem themselves. The Spirit of truth invites us to approach different people, different individuals, different organizations, different legislators, different situations and challenges with different tools depending on what the circumstance requires. But what is always clear is that anyone or anything that seeks to limit our access to information or our ability to discern is not inviting us to live in the spirit of truth. So that was just the first one. There's two more. Secondly, the spirit of truth invites us to co-create solutions with God and with each other. We are not passive, as you know, or else, again, you would not be listening to me at 8 o'clock at night in this ballroom. As a lobby, you all work together to create a platform, and you partner with other organizations to do that. And then do we offer that platform to our legislators who are wrestling while we model God's love to understand the obstacles that they face? Or do we say that the obstacles that they face are their problems and our responsibility stops at demanding what we want from them? For those decision makers who are stubbornly opposed to us, do we leverage discernment and the spirit of truth to understand important distinctions? Not all Pharisees are the same. You can hear this in your head next time you go to the Hill. Not all Pharisees are the same. Some may be Nicodemus, willing to meet with us in the middle of the night and influence their peers. And others may be so obsessed with the law, as they understand it, that they have forgotten how to love. The spirit of truth helps us distinguish between those two and co-create something new to reach each of them. And third, the spirit of truth compels us to see the solutions that will allow us to stay in right relationship and to expand our right relationships. It's not about maintaining relationships for relationships' sake. It's about naming and correcting whatever we find that prevents us from being in right relationship, that preserves the dignity of each person, each entity in that relationship, and repeatedly choosing systems and structures that will support us in being in that kind of healthy, right relationship. At Faith in Public Life, we apply the spirit of truth through our new mission, which is focused on building power of faith leaders across traditions towards building systems that hold our human rights sacred, and also building communities of belonging that allow us to be in right relationship with one another. We have observed the level of political violence in our country, people using violence for their own political gain. And we've decided to focus on that, to resist that, to interrupt that, to prepare people to resist that and to interrupt that. And not only are we training faith leaders to do that, but we're building power so that we can create systems that will not allow that to happen. We know that people cannot belong if they can't discern their health care and other major decisions in their lives. So we support faith leaders in speaking against criminalizing abortion care and building power so that our governments create conditions for comprehensive health care, access to comprehensive health care, including but not limiting abortion services. This is hard, y'all. This is the hard work, the spiritual work. If the answers were easy, somebody would have done it already, right? And that is why I'm grateful that God has sent us an advocate. I have deep faith that the spirit of truth will guide us through these waters. And I want to remind you of the end of the scripture I read. So end of verse 17 and verse 18. But you know it, the spirit of truth, because it remains with you and will be in you. I will not leave you orphans. I will come to you. The spirit of truth is within us. It remains in us. It will remain in us. Jesus will come to us. You have what you need to discern what is right. And the key is to keep asking those questions because as humans, we are prone to forget. So I promise you a song as I close out. I use music to remember who I am holistically, because it is something that is in the body, and we humans, we forget a lot of stuff when we get stuck in our head, and sometimes it's good to get into the body. When we sing together, we're gonna sing together. Tricked you. We're gonna sing together, because when we sing together, we share breath, and we know since 2020 how precious our breath is. We share vibration, literally. in our throats and our diaphragms. We create sound waves in the air. It's a physical reminder that we are connected, that we share a spirit of truth, and that our collective action creates something new that we alone cannot create individually. So we're going to sing a song together. We're going to sing it in a round. It's not hard, I promise. And given what's happening in the Middle East, I selected a song that Songrise sings called Peace, Salam, Shalom, which is the word peace in English, Arabic, and Hebrew. It is by Emma's Revolution, which is a folk. Yeah, anybody know Emma's Revolution? Yeah, great. Folk group. I'm a huge fan of Emma's Revolution. I heard a Black civil rights leader once say that Appalachian music is soul music. I couldn't agree with them more. Emma's Revolution is the best. So I'm gonna teach everybody Peace, Salam, Shalom, just the first part. We're not singing the whole thing, in case you don't know it. And then this half of the room, so from this front table over to your left, is gonna sing it first, and then we're gonna bring in the right side of the room, and we're gonna sing it until the Spirit tells me to stop, which I promise won't be too long. So this is how it goes, and I'm gonna just keep singing it over and over, so when you're ready, join in with me, and when I hear a critical mass of voices, we'll split it up. Peace, salam, shalom. 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 One more time together. Peace, salam, shalom. Peace, salam, shalom. Peace, salam, shalom. Peace, salam, shalom. Okay, cut. You guys sound really good. All right. So we're going to start on this side. And you all are going to sing the first two lines, and then we're going to bring in the right side, okay? Ready? Yes. All right, let's do it. Peace, salam, shalom. 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 Keep going. Peace, salam, shalom. 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 Thank you, everyone.
You know, it's not easy to teach Quakers to sing, especially in rounds. So
Did a wonderful job.
thank you so much. That was really wonderful. And I think I actually want to see if you're willing to have some questions with the audience, with the community here. Great. So we have a few minutes, folks, probably about 15 minutes. And we have people online and we have people in the room. And what I wanted to do is just let you raise your hands physically in the room or electronically on Zoom. If you have a question for Jeanné or anything you want to share with her.
We have a question there.
Yes.
There's someone.
Oh, you have someone here? Sorry, I can't see. Go ahead, and please do identify yourself. If there's a mic runner,
I'm the mic runner, but I had
you're
a
the mic
question while I was.
That's right.
But while you were speaking and you were talking about how you listen for the Spirit of truth and God in your discernment, I was just struck by where or how do you listen for that in this practice?
Yeah, absolutely. I feel odd telling Quakers how to listen for the voice of God. It seems strange. But I very much appreciate nature and silence. And so actual silence, but also being quiet and listening to nature. And when I say listen to nature, I pay attention for what's around me and what inspires me. I learn a lot from nature, from how trees grow, from how animals behave. I just watch them and sort of learn from their wisdom. But I also spend a lot of time in silence and meditation, breathing. Sometimes I'll use a mantra. Sometimes I'll use Lectio Divina, which we did today. I'll read a scripture and listen for which words stand out to me and just sit in silence, which I understand you do a lot of that as well, and listen to what arises in my spirit. I look for what moves me emotionally. Because then I know that something is stirring within me. And I don't necessarily take the first emotion that arises, but I do notice that if it moves me emotionally, it must be important in some way. And I also love poetry, particularly Sufi poetry. I read Sufi poetry before I go to bed. It gives me interesting dreams. But the metaphor and the imagery that's used in poetry, especially Sufi poetry, is really inspiring to me and just opens up my mind to possibilities I wouldn't otherwise be able to see.
Great, thank you. And there's a hand here, friend in the blue sweater, Deanne, who I know well.
Hi, Jeanné.
Hello.
Thank you. My question is about humility. And so my religious frame of reference is that there's that of God in everyone and that God can speak to me. That's where the discernment comes in. But Quakers over the centuries have learned that just because I'm convinced that it was the voice of God,
That's right.
doesn't necessarily mean that I get it right.
That's right.
And so we have a custom of convening others to help us get clear and test. But so my question is just where humility and the knowledge that we're not perfect and changing our minds, all of those, how does that connect with the Spirit of truth?
Absolutely. I'm so glad you said that. Other people are absolutely a part of my discernment and yours, and I hope for everyone. And I think the best way to answer that is an example. So our organization focuses on domestic issues. When Hamas attacked Israel and then the Israeli military invaded Gaza in response, my staff and I were getting requests from a lot of our stakeholders because we work with a lot of Jewish and Muslim stakeholders, but also other Christians about making a statement, doing something. My staff, particularly my organizers, they organized against me. So they made a letter. They had 14 things they wanted me to do based on what they heard from other people. I was proud of them because that's literally their jobs. So I met with them and I listened. I had received a text message from a good friend of mine who is Jewish, who was just experiencing so much grief and confusion within herself. I called a Palestinian friend of mine who I didn't know at the time, but he was in Jerusalem when Hamas attacked Israel. He's Palestinian American. He lives here. He was in Jerusalem with Jews, Christians, and Muslims on a trip when Hamas attacked. and he was barely able to get home. He had to take a bus to Jordan. I talked to him and I listened. There were some of our stakeholders who were annoyed that I wasn't making a statement fast enough. I listened. And I think you're absolutely right that not only humility, but good discernment requires us to listen with deep compassion and understanding to others. And with all of that, I didn't do anything that any of them wanted me to do. That's not where we landed. Because what most of them wanted us to do as Faith in Public Life was to comment on the U.S.'s involvement in Israel, to comment on what the Israeli government was doing, to comment on the release of hostages, to host an event that would allow people to comment politically on these things. And that is not what we are equipped to do. My discernment told me that we are not equipped to hold that space with integrity. And so I said no. But what I did was I observed that every day I was hearing that a Jewish person was attacked, a Palestinian rally had death threats, a 10-year-old boy was murdered, a synagogue was defaced. And that we are equipped to do. That is what we do all the time. We train people about how to resist this type of violence in the United States. So while everybody wanted us to make a statement with the language that was familiar to them around the lens that they held on this issue, what Faith in Public Life did was that we provided resources to our community about how to interrupt the violence that was happening here and how to resist political violence against our Jewish and Muslim brothers and sisters here in the United States, because that is what God has called us to do in our mission and in our vision. And I could not have gotten there if I had not listened to others, because initially that's not what I was going to do. I didn't see that as a pathway. I didn't know that that was a way. But it was someone on my staff who made a comment about political violence in the U.S. And as I was listening to all these other voices, that's what I kept hearing. And as I prayed about that, and I checked it with my Palestinian friend, and I checked it with my Jewish rabbi on my board, and I checked it with my friends, they said, yeah, somebody needs to talk about that. Thank you.
I want to just also check that online, if you want to put a question in a chat, we do have tech hosts online that can help with that, I'm sure. So please do flag me from online if I'm missing any questions there. Is there another question in the room?
Oh, there's something.
I'm not seeing you very well. Thank you. Olivia.
Hello.
Hello.
Stephen online does have a question. Stephen, you can unmute now and ask.
Thank you, Olivia, and thank you, Speaker Lewis, for being with us. I had a question about the reading from John, to which you pointed out that the spirit of the truth resides in God and in ourselves and in our neighbors. And it puts me in mind of the way friends used to refer to themselves back in the day. We are the religious society of friends and seekers of the truth, not all that different than listening to the spirit of truth. And I'm wondering how you construe those three different sources of truth. Is that three gods? Clearly, my neighbor can have a very different perspective on an issue like abortion or something, but her or his perspective might be the truth to that person and different from mine. So how do I reconcile these different truths?
That's an excellent question. I believe that the spirit of truth emanates from God. Though it resides in us, it comes from God to us and to our neighbors. And because of that, because of our own imperfections, our own frailty as humans, I don't believe that I or any of us on our own can fully understand the deep truth that emanates from God. I think we can get close. I think that we can have clarity, moments of clarity for certain situations, but I don't deign to understand the mind and the heart of God fully at any given time. And so I was having a conversation over dinner with some folks from FCNL about when it seems that we and our neighbor are in opposition to one another, that something underneath that is the truth. Something that I think about often is how words get in our way. So I've often spoken to religious folks, Catholic folks in particular, who some folks who don't understand Black Lives Matter movement, and I translate some of the things that people say into Catholic social teaching, right? So when social justice movements, current movements, talk about radical joy, and they talk about radical inclusion, what they're talking about is the fruits of the Spirit and human dignity. They are the same to me. Radical joy is a fruit of the Spirit, is it not? It's in the Bible, right? And it comes because we accept the Spirit of God, and it comes because we recognize the Spirit of God in one another, and we are in deep communion and community with one another, and we have radical joy about God's love for us as we are, despite our flaws, despite our frailties, despite our fears. We have that radical joy because God loves us, fruit of the Spirit. When people talk about radical inclusion, meaning acceptance, no matter whether you are differently able, no matter who you have sex with, no matter how you wear your hair, what clothes you wear, what your genitalia look like, what they're talking about is that every single human being is made in the image of likeness of God and deserves dignity and respect because of it. That is what they're saying. Those are Catholic ideas. Those are African ideas. Those are queer ideas. That is the spirit of truth. And so I think often when we feel we disagree, what we disagree with are the surface level details of what we're talking about. And so for me, as a Christian, as someone who is committed to deepening my listening and understanding of God's will, I am always listening for what is underneath, what is recognizable to me as God's love. And usually it's there if I can listen deeply enough. If I get distracted by the conclusions or by the language, the specific vocabulary that's being used, I lose sight of the truth that we share as human beings. It's not perfect. We're humans, right? It's not perfect. But for me, to answer your question in terms of how to reconcile that difference, for me, it's deeper listening. How can I listen more deeply? And how can I expose myself more to those who are different from me and look for the commonalities so that I can then translate?
Thank you. Friends, we're nearing the end of our time, and everyone's awake, Jeanné. Everyone is very awake.
I don't know, some people left, so we'll forgive them.
They'll be back. We might have time for one more question if there's one additional question, either online or in the room. Or we can share deep gratitude for Jeanné. And
I think you have one.
We have one.
What do you have to say about the campaign for DC statehood and why it matters everywhere?
Thank you. Thank you.
I love that question. Everybody call your legislator. I know you have their phone number, and tell them to vote for DC statehood. One, it's the right thing to do. It's 700,000 of us here. I'm going to estimate maybe 500,000 of us we're not registered in other jurisdictions. And so we don't have full representation, and we should. Right? But it is also strategic, as many good things are. Washington, D.C. is the front line of authoritarianism that stems from our federal government. Washington, D.C. is the front line against authoritarianism that might stem from our federal government. So if there is, hypothetically, an attack on the Capitol building, it is Washington, D.C. residents who are protecting our federal buildings. Not solely, but we're there. My office is around the corner from here. If someone in the executive branch, hypothetically, wants to restrict access to health care, restrict access to other rights and responsibilities that we have as citizens, because the federal government has to approve our budget every year before we can spend money, they can interrupt whether or not the District of Columbia can provide that access. Congress can do that every year. My mother's a teacher. She would get furloughed sometimes because Congress couldn't make up its mind on how much money she could spend as a teacher. Washington, D.C. and I and our residents are the front line against authoritarianism that may stem from our federal government. So it is in your interests to tell your representatives to give us statehood. And statehood is usually used as a bargaining chip for different things that need to happen at the federal government. You may have been able to tell this from my persona. I don't like being used as a bargaining chip. And so I'm asking you to talk to your representatives to not allow that to happen. Thank you for the question.
Thank you so much. All right. So we are nearing the finish line of the day. And we have just two other things to do. First, I believe we need to hear from our process observers, and this is part of our community agreement and process. So, Jeanné, if you don't mind listening to us. Are there process observers that are reporting? Lauren, is that happening? Yes.
Wait, is Sergio in the room? And I don't know if Tracy's online. He's on his way.
I saw Tracy earlier online. There is Sergio. Thank you.
Good evening, friends. I don't know if Tracy wants to say anything. Is she online? Oh, yeah. I think you're muted.
Hi, thank you all. I thought the presentation went very well. There were no issues online, so thank you.
Thank you, Tracy. So I've stepped in as AT, and Lindsay had to head out. So I will also be serving as a designated listener tomorrow, so I'll be here if you need to. Yeah, just quickly, just wanted to share, we've been having some really difficult conversations this weekend as we're seeking the community we want to be. So I just wanted to, encourage us as we continue to wrap up this weekend. We are here if you have something that you want to speak about. And as we're trying to live out our JEDI values and statement, this has been a really productive weekend, and we've had some really productive conversations. So if you have anything that you want to raise with us, we'll be around. And I think the process facilitators will be debriefing after the session as well. So thank you.
Thank you, and thank you for the service of all those folks involved. And do remember there are designated listeners if you want someone to listen. Thank you all for being so faithful. Thank you, Jeanné, for bringing your spirit of truth into the room with us. A reminder, business meeting begins at 8:30 tomorrow morning. 8:30, we've got a lot of worship to do. 8:30 tomorrow morning. But before you go, we also have one last special spirit moving event with Hassan. Is he here? All right, so Jeanné, we can step off the stage. I'm going to invite Hassan up on the stage. And Hassan, I don't know if you were in the room when we made this special announcement you told me about, but folks know now that Representative Jacobs has announced ceasefire. So you might, just want to make sure you know. And can we give Hassan a round of applause for leading us in this, and Odelia, wherever she is, if she's here. Thank you.
I think the applause goes to the Advocacy Corps right now because they pushed her after her speech, which was fantastic. I definitely wouldn't want to jump up here without Tom. We're going to do an oldie but goodie. I think you might know this one. Check one. Okay. Did you all have some fun here with us? Okay, cool.
I'm ready.
I'm gonna lay down my sword and shield down by the riverside, down by the riverside, down by the riverside. I'm gonna lay down my sword and shield down by the riverside. I'm gonna study war no more. I ain't gonna study war no more. Ain't gonna study war no more. Ain't gonna study war no more. No more, no more. I ain't gonna study war no more. Ain't gonna study war no more. Ain't gonna study war no more.
I'm gonna write a letter to the editor down by the riverside, down by the riverside, down by the riverside. I'm gonna write a letter to the editor
Down by the riverside,
I'm gonna study war no more.
I ain't gonna study war no more.
I ain't gonna study war no more. Ain't gonna study war no more, no more, no more. I ain't gonna study war no more. Ain't gonna study war no more. Ain't gonna study war no more.
I'm gonna stick my sword in the golden sand down by the riverside, down by the riverside, down by the riverside. I'm gonna stick my sword in the golden sand down by the riverside. I'm gonna study war no more. I ain't gonna study war no more. Ain't gonna study war no more. Ain't gonna study war no more.
No more, no more.
I ain't gonna study war no more. Ain't gonna study war no more. Ain't gonna study
war no more. I'm gonna shake hands around the world down by the riverside, down by the riverside, down by the riverside. I'm gonna shake hands around the world down by the riverside. Gonna study war no more. Big chorus.
I ain't gonna study war no more.
I ain't gonna study war no more. Ain't gonna study war no more. No more, no more.
I ain't gonna study war no more.
Ain't gonna study war no more. Ain't gonna study war no more.
I ain't gonna study war no more. Ain't gonna
Study war no more.
Ain't gonna
Study war no more.
I ain't gonna study war no more. Ain't gonna study war no more. Ain't gonna study
war no more.
Thanks, y'all.
All right, brother.
Well, we're so grateful to get to play music with you all, and maybe we'll do some more music. Oh, you want? Okay. Well, okay, I guess this is, yeah. I thought we were just going to get away with just doing the one. I tune because I care. Hold a second. Okay. Okay, we can. And you wanna? Over here. Tell me, have you read the news? The whole damn world has got the blues. If we knew the only way out was through, then you and I are better off together. And if we sing with one voice, maybe someday we'll form a chorus loud enough to end these wars. Yeah, you and I are better off together. Maybe we stop arming all these planes, stop the bombing of Ukraine. Let me tell you, all I'm saying is you and I are better off together. Better off together. Better off together. One thing I know is you and I are better off together. If the oceans start to rise, I know your boat is tied to mine. It matters not where we reside. Yeah, let's get to higher ground together. And if we hear mothers cry in Ferguson or Palestine, yeah, we won't turn no blind eyes. Let's get to higher ground together. If we all took a stand, we could stop wars across this land. Yes, I hope we all understand that we're all in this thing together. Better off together. You guys can sing it if you want. Better off together. One thing I know is you and I are better off together. If you're lost and don't know where you belong, come find me in the darkness before the dawn. I hope it don't take long to help me sing this song. We're better off together. Take my hand and come with me, and I'll take your hand and come with you. 'Cause we know the only way out is through, and you and I are better off together. Better off together. Better off together. One thing I know is you and I are better off together. Better off together. Better off together. One thing I know is you and I are better off together. We're better off together. Better off together. One thing I know is we're better off together. Thanks, y'all.